think we'll go ahead and get started now. Welcome everyone to the webinar on Innovative and Exemplary Respite Services. I am Jill Kagan, Director of the Arch National Respite Network and Resource Center, and we're delighted to have so many attendees today. It's really exciting that there's so much interest. Before I turn it over to our host, I just wanted to mention a few important housekeeping tasks in case there are one or two of you out there who are still not familiar with the Zoom platform. You are all currently muted, and we would request that you keep yourself muted. Also, to ensure that you have the bandwidth during the presentation, we don't want you to get knocked off. We recommended that you keep your cameras turned off if you're not presenting. To mute yourself or control your camera, you can find these two icons that you see on the slide here. They should be down at the bottom of your screen on the left-hand side. There will be some time for questions and answers, but please feel free to type your comments or your questions into the chat at any time, and we'll be monitoring those. And when we pause for questions, we'll take the time then to share them with the presenters. If you do get disconnected, please reconnect using the link that you received in your confirmation email, or you can just email me directly at jkagan@archrespite.org, and I'll put that into the chat box in a minute. That email should also be in your confirmation email. In a few minutes, I'll also put the link to the PowerPoint slides in the chat, but you will also receive an email immediately after the webinar asking you to complete a short survey to give us your feedback, and we really would appreciate your feedback. That email will also have a link to the slides as well as to the website where the webinar recording, and we are recording this today for those who couldn't join us. You'll have the link to the future posting of the webinar that we should hope to have up in a day or two. Okay, now I would like to turn the event over to our two fabulous webinar hosts, Dr. Susan Janko-Summers and Cassandra Furman, both of whom are with Arch. So Susan, I believe I'm turning it over to you.
You are. Thanks, Jill. I want to welcome everyone. You're going to hear something wonderful this morning. So my name is Susan Janko-Summers. I'm here with my longtime friend and colleague, Cassandra Furman. Cassandra and I met about 35 years ago when we were directing a crisis respite program. And Cassandra, I don't know if this is true for you, but for me, I think of it as some of the most important work that I've ever done in my life. And I would also say that we were really good at it, but not as good as the three programs that you're going to hear from. And you're going to hear this morning from ChildServe in Johnston, Iowa. Barb Williams is going to present. Sherry Kaiser is going to present on the Agape program in Bern, Indiana. And Fran Pinella and Kelly Servodio are going to present on the Alzheimer's Respite Care Program in Toms River, New Jersey. Next slide. Thanks, Cass. So today what we want to do is just talk about the purpose of the Arch Innovative and Exemplary Practice Initiative. And then we want to describe the application and selection process of programs. And we really hope that those of you who have programs that you believe are innovative or exemplary will consider applying, or if you know about programs, that you'll urge those programs to apply. And then the most important part is we're going to introduce you to three programs that have been recognized by Arch as innovative and exemplary. Next slide, please. So this initiative started about 4 years ago, and one of the things we wanted to do is identify and document promising practices. There's a shortage of published research about what constitutes best practice in affecting positive change for caregivers, for care recipients, for families. And so we wanted to take an inventory of what's out there and share it with the network. And the second thing we wanted to do is learn more about evidence-based or evidence-informed practices. Again, because there's a shortage of research, we want to document what programs are doing. So programs, even though they're not relying on published research, are collecting performance-based and outcome data about the services they offer. And they're also collecting fidelity data. So we can rely on those models to guide us in services. So again, we wanted to document and inventory those. The third thing we wanted to do is to learn ways about addressing aspects of respite to challenging populations. So you're going to hear today from a program that serves families of children with chronic and complicated special health care needs as one example. And then the last thing we wanted to do is just honor their work and inspire you by their work. Okay, next slide. And Cassandra, I'm going to hand it over to you to describe the process. Unmute, dear.
I'm sorry, I was off to such a good start. The instructions for how to complete the application are all on the Arch website. And to make it simple for you, we've got a link here on the slide, and I'm going to take you to that website in a few moments. But I want to start by pointing out the pre-application checklist. I've printed it on this slide, but it's also going to be on the web pages. We would like to make sure that programs, before they apply, they need to have been in operation for a minimum of 3 years. We also, the second criteria is that they have written guidelines for their respite services. So something that could be used potentially for replication, but there's a clear set of procedures and protocols for providing the services that they provide. And then the third thing is related to accountability. We want to make sure that the programs have some written plan for measuring and documenting outcomes or performance measures that are targeted by the program. That could be, it doesn't have to be a logic model, but a logic model is helpful here, or any other set of written goals and ways of measuring those goals and objectives are important. So if you meet those criteria, I'm just going to take you to the website. And it opened. And what you'll find is there is a lot of information. And because we want to focus today on really hearing from those 3 programs, I can't show you everything, but I invite you to come back to the website and go through it. But we have information about the Innovative and Exemplary Award. We have named the honorees who have received these awards in the past. And then it tells you how we use the information. And when you scroll down to the bottom, you'll get some information about how to apply. What's important is that when you click on this link for applying here, and I'm not going to click on that link, but it will take you to a web-enabled application form. It's not one of those forms where you can save and come back on another day. In other words, you'll need to be prepared to complete the whole application when you first click on that. So we recommend that you download the download the instructions and print them out or have them available in Word. So darn it. There you go. So basically you can download the application in Word, and then you can type out your responses so that when you go online and you're ready to submit the application, it's going to be ready for you. You'll have all the work done and you can do it in one setting. So, sorry, I'm gonna go back to the slideshow, get out of here. some of the things we look for, and I'm going to take you to our criteria for selection. So once you've completed the application and submitted it, friends, our friends at Arch will review the application very carefully, and there's 7 criteria that guide us. And we're going to go through these criteria in detail, but right now I just wanted to show them all on one screen. The first one is whether or not it's evidence-based or evidence-informed. So is your approach based on what the research says works? Now, we know that there's not a huge body of research on specific respite programs and respite approaches. But we do know that there is a lot of evidence out there on what actually works and is most successful in serving families. Arch has an annotated bibliography on our website. I welcome you to go to that website and have a look at the existing research that we're familiar with. However, we also believe that an evidence-informed practice can include the wisdom and the knowledge that you've gained through actually providing services. Have you collected information from the families and the caregivers you serve on what works best for them? Have you collected information from families and the local community on what they really need and value in terms of respite? So if you have documented evidence that you've collected, or if you have evidence that you've gathered through the research, then that's one of the things we're looking for. We want to make sure that a thoughtful process of examining the evidence has gone into the development of your services. We also believe that programs need a clearly stated purpose with specified outcomes and objectives and goals that they want to achieve. So we'll be looking for clearly stated goals, outcomes, and objectives, and some plan for how you're going to measure those and collect data on them. We also would like, the third criteria is a program or service manual, some kind of document that specifies how the services are provided, how you recruit and train providers or volunteers, how you interact with caregivers and families to ensure your services are the most responsive to their needs. So some set of guidelines, and we look at it in terms of whether or not your program could be replicated. So your guidelines or your manual hopefully is something that you could hand to another program and they would be able to follow your procedures if they chose to replicate your services. And Susan, this is you. Susan, you're on mute.
Sorry, it just told me that. The fourth criteria we look at is the extent to which person and family-centered services are collaborative, and the extent to which they're used in planning, delivering, and evaluating services. And you all are really familiar with this concept, but what I want you to notice as you listen to our programs today is that they go beyond this to real relationship-based services that have important benefits in increasing social isolation, in staff and volunteer retention, which is a really big issue in respite services, and building long-lasting communities of care. And you'll see the person and family-centered services in every aspect of these programs, from intake to staff training, to data collection, to planning and sustainability. So what I'm saying is one piece of these programs, one piece of these criteria inform other actions and other parts of their program. Next slide, please, Cassandra. Thanks. So the fifth criteria we look at is professional development planning. We want to ensure staff and volunteer are trained and supported, often through coaching and supervision, for example, so that they're confident and competent in providing service according to program plans, policies, and protocols. So these programs are very coherent across these different criteria. And notice as you listen to the presenters how their training not only directly supports their mission, but it's responsive in real time to caregiver, care recipient, and family needs. So it's not just the one survey at the end of the program. These programs are really aware of what's going on, and that informs their professional development. Next slide, please. The sixth criteria we consider is program evaluation and data collection, measuring program implementation, fidelity, consumer satisfaction, and person and family-centered goals related to the individual and program goals. So again, I want you to notice that data collection goes far beyond a single survey. It begins at the time of the first contact with families, in terms of learning about family circumstances and preferences, for example. And notice how these programs collect data that informs program changes and again, staff training. And next slide, please. So the last criteria we look at is sustainability. This includes, whoops, could you go back one? What happened to our sustainability? I think we lost it. I'll just tell you about it anyways. We do consider program sustainability, and it's really important, and you're going to see excellent examples of it from these three programs. Sustainability includes stable and shared leadership, diversified resources, a written plan, and I work on this with a number of states. And even though it's done differently in programs, you'll see a lot of parallels to the program that the efforts that we made at systems level planning. So when you hear these programs, listen for stories of how the three programs grew slowly, but intentionally, strategically. They had clear goals, they had clear vision. Notice how sophisticated their planning is, how diverse their resources are, their accountability to stakeholders, their generosity in mentoring new leaders and supporting one another and becoming leaders. And we have a good example of that today. Next slide, please. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to the three programs. Sherry Kaiser is the executive director from Agape Research. And I'm going to introduce all the presenters now, but they're going to present individually in three, and they'll just continue their presentations. So Sherry Kaiser is a mom to Brianna and Jacob. She became a care provider at Agape Respite Research after Jacob was born prematurely. While working part-time at Agape, Sherry earned her nursing degree in 2011. After full-time nursing in the hospital, a doctor's office, and as nurse educator at a hospital, Sherry returned to Agape as director in 2017, where her passion to serve families and individuals with disabilities began. The second program you'll hear from is the Alzheimer's program in New Jersey. So Kelly Servodio, and here's a great example of shared leadership. Kelly's filling in for Megan O'Keefe, who is ill today. And so I think she has had like just this morning to prepare, and she's here with Belzon. Kelly was born and raised in Toms River, New Jersey, and she now resides in Barnegat. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, New Jersey. She's always had a passion for volunteering and helping others. So she decided to turn her passion into a career and began working at Caregiver Volunteers in September 2019. So Kelly's the director of community relations and outreach at Caregiving Volunteers. When she's not working or volunteering, Kelly spends time at home with her husband, Adam, and her three dogs, Midnight, Foxy, and Luna. And Kelly's presenting with Fran Panella, who has served as the director of the Alzheimer's Respite Care and Connect Through Music programs at Caregiver Volunteers of Central Jersey since 2016. Fran is a licensed practical nurse, a certified dementia care practitioner, Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care master trainer, and a Memory Bridge graduate. Fran has over 20 years of experience in geriatric nursing focused on dementia care, and she's passionate about positive aging and quality of life for those individuals living with dementia. Fran created a specialized fitness program for individuals with dementia called Movement, Music, and Memories, and is a member of the Alive Inside Foundation Board of Directors. And then our third presenter, who is actually going to start first, is Barb William. And Barb has more than 25 years experience working with children and young adults with special health care needs in respite and other programs. In addition, Barb and her family spent 10 years providing respite in their home. Barb has worked at ChildServe for more than 22 years and currently oversees their respite, supported community living, and day habilitation services. So with that, I'm going to mute myself, hand it over to Barb, and I'll monitor the chat box if any of you have questions as our presenters share information about their programs. So Barb.
Thank you. I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit, kind of an overview of ChildServe. We provide services throughout the state of Iowa. Here is a picture of our Johnston Center, where we have a variety of inpatient and outpatient services that range from behavioral health to complex medical issues. And we have specialty clinics that focus on concussions, brain injuries, and child development, to name a few. Our community service program includes respite, which you can see there on the screen. In this last year, we provided respite to over 650 children and young adults with over 500 staff. We have been providing respite for about 25 years, and this last year, we provided over 133,000 hours of respite to children and young adults in Iowa. ChildServe's mission is to partner with families to help children with special health care needs to live a great life. In our respite program, our focus is on birth to age 25 years old. And we have several different kinds of respite that we provide. We have group respite, which takes place in one of our locations here in the center pictured. And that is where we bring 10 to 12 children and young adults together, and they spend the weekend. We also have several day groups that are split out by age of the children. And some of those spend time in the community, and some take place here in the center. And those groups are a great break. They give families a nice break, and it's also a fun environment for the children. We hear families tell us that they feel great using respite and enjoying themselves when they know that their kids are also having a good time during that. We also provide one-on-one or individual respite, and that takes place either in the community or the child's home. And something unique about our individual respite is a large number of staff that provide that service are family friends. They're referred to us by the family that's going to receive their respite. It's somebody that's already known and familiar with their child that's going to receive that respite. We hear from families that this is a great way for them to start using respite, especially with some of our families that have younger children or really any age of child that is new to respite. This allows them to feel comfortable leaving their child in someone else's care when maybe that isn't something that they've done a lot. And so we will work with that applicant and make sure that they still meet some basic requirements, but we will allow them only to work with that family. So sometimes it's a family member, grandmas and grandpas, sometimes it's a neighbor, it's a school associate, someone that the family has gotten to know. We also provide specialized respite, which is respite with a nurse. And I should mention that in our group respite, we do have a couple of groups that happen throughout each month that when we're not in the middle of a pandemic, that there's a nurse on staff for each shift. And so we can take children with more medically complex needs during those weekends. And we also do a camp program in the summers and over spring and winter breaks from school that allows, again, families to have that break and the child a fun opportunity to meet children and meet other children and to be able to participate in the community. We can move on to the next slide. So here's a picture of our staff, Brandon, and there is Aiden. Aiden is a child that started out with us just as I was describing, where he used respite only with his grandparents. Mom and dad were new to the waiver and were really feeling like, this break thing sounds like a pretty good idea, but just not quite sure how how that's going to work for our family and letting somebody new care for Aiden. And so they started with their grandparents. And after a few years of that, we've kind of been slowly planting the seed with them that we have this great group respite that we think Aiden would enjoy and that we could meet his needs during that group. And so his parents decided to let him start coming to our respite groups. And we partner with them ongoing to make sure that we have the most, updated information on what Aiden needs from us when he's in our care. We have paperwork that we complete at least annually that lets us know how mom and dad want us to care for Aiden and how they want us to meet his needs. We really feel like we need to have a partnership with families because we understand that what kind of respite, when they need respite, the care their child needs, that is going to change. We can't just, enroll a family and expect that we're going to understand everything that they need. And so we have a process where we're meeting with that family on a regular basis. We're talking to them. We're getting feedback when Aiden is using respite from the staff and hear how that's going and make any needed changes that we need to as we go on. Brandon happens to be one of our staff that works in our group weekends. And last year we had to suspend our group respite for a couple of months when the pandemic first got started. And we worked diligently to be able to bring those groups back in a safe way. We do smaller numbers. We staff with more staff than maybe we were before. We have additional training, cleaning, masking, screening protocols that need to happen so that everybody can feel comfortable, including the staff, in working in those groups. And I know Aiden's mom said that him coming to group respite is a great way, like I mentioned, for him to be able to socialize. They call it his sleepover with his friends. That's what they tell him when they're going to use group respite. And we had a family give us feedback about group respite. And this has been a few years, but I will always remember this story. As they said that they brought their child into our center and they sat in the parking lot and looked at each other and what do we do now? Like we really wanted this break. Now we've dropped our child off. How are these strangers really going to know how to care for our child when we struggle to do it all the time at home? And the dad told me that the longer they sat there in the car, they thought, well, nobody's calling us. Maybe we should just go ahead and go have dinner like we planned. Maybe we'll even sneak in a movie. Nobody's calling us yet, right? And so the next morning they called and they learned that their daughter was doing great at respite and that staff seemed to be engaged with their child and knew what was going on that weekend. And they felt so good about that. And they just never really thought that they would be able to have a break like that. We hear that a lot from our families that you can't just hire a teenage kid down the street. You can't just always ask your family members to watch your children when they have special needs, whether it be behavior related or complex medical needs. And so respite is truly something that they've come to count on. And looking at our staff, Brandon there reminds me, he is a classic example of who we're recruiting. We really work with our local colleges to be able to recruit staff. We promote this to them at, hey, this is a great part-time job. We'll be flexible with your class schedule. You can have weekend and evening hours. It's a great resume builder if you want to go into, education or human services. Or Brandon, for example, wants to be an occupational therapist. So he has worked for us for years as he has gone to school. And so it's been able to give him some valuable insight into his own education. I think our family partnerships and understanding that we need to listen to families has helped us continue to provide services during the pandemic. We've worked really hard to establish, when are you going to be comfortable returning to service? When are staff going to be comfortable returning to work? So that is something that we have just continued to work on. We can advance to slide 3. Thank you. This is another picture of Aiden when he was just a little guy with his mom, Cindy. And so just kind of wanted to share that as well. ChildServe has an overall strategic plan that is updated every 3 years. It's usually a 10-year plan that we look at. And so Respite each year will develop our own annual operating plan from that, looking at the goals that the whole ChildServe has, and then what do we want to focus on in Respite that kind of aligns with that. Some areas of focus that we have for Respite this year include service expansion, ensuring that we're meeting all the compliance and certification standards, and adjusting our practice to the ever-changing needs of not only our staff and families, or I guess both staff and families, making sure that we're listening to both of those groups to understand how we can continue to provide service that's needed. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. Here is a picture of our camp. It looks like they've been having some fun out in the sun when this picture was taken. One thing that we developed for our families is a handbook that we give to them not only upon enrollment, but every year, that has important information for them about what they need to know to use services, what they can expect from us as far as communication and staff training and all the things that they want to know to make sure their child's being taken care of. For our staff, we have what we call our new hire training binder that includes an overview of all the policies that they need to be aware of to provide services in the community. We do a special community services orientation that includes some training on how to provide services safely in the community. Our staff are out working on their own with children, either in the child's home or in the community, so there's certain things that they need to, certain resources that they need to have to be able to do that. And we can look at our last slide. So as far as measuring what families want, as I mentioned earlier, we definitely want to have a relationship with that family. They have an assigned supervisor that works with them and is touching base. We have things that we measure to make sure that families are getting the services that they signed up for, that they're getting the hours that their family needs. If we see that a family's not using or a staff's not working, then those are indicators to us that we need to follow up and find out, is there something more we need to be doing to help with that. We do a lot of tracking of staff training to make sure that we're compliant with that. We also look at how long does it take us to hire a staff and how long does it take us to enroll a child, so that we make sure that we're doing those both as efficiently as possible. That just helps us to bring more service to more families, which is really what our goal in Respite is, and to have that be a great service provided by great staff. So that's kind of an overview of ChildServe and our Respite. And I think there's going to be time at the end. I would be happy to answer any questions. And I see that a couple people maybe put some in the chat. So I'm sure we'll get to that at the end after everybody's had a chance to present.
Hello, I'm Sherry Kaiser, Director of Agape Respite Care, located in Bern, Indiana. We're a small community, just a little over 4,200 people live in our community. And I just want to take a minute just to thank Jill Kagan, Susan Summers, and Cassandra Furman for allowing me to come and represent Agape today and just share with all of you a little bit about our practices and how we serve the families we serve. Next slide, Cassandra. So I'm just going to take all of you on our Agape journey a little bit and show you how we started in the photo on the left and how we came to serve out of the photo on the right in that home. The woman in the photos is Roberta Lehman. She goes by Birdie, and that's her daughter, Jessica, from Bern, Indiana, always has lived here. Back before 1992, her and a group of other moms got together because they all had children with special needs of some kind. And they found their children aging out of programs and knew they needed help of some sort. So they made this mom group and would meet regularly. And as they were brainstorming, they would talk about their fears and what their needs were. And they came up with the plan that Respite would serve them best. So throughout that, they had to ask themselves questions like, what would that look like, and address their fears as far as who's going to be able to take care of their loved one like they do. Where would the respite take place? Do they want individuals in their home? They knew they wanted it to have a Christian foundation. And they also knew that resources in the surrounding area were limited. So education had to take place. So they went out into the community and started educating our small town of their need for help with their loved ones. They went and spoke at several of the local churches, and Birdie's church is the first Mennonite church, and they got behind our mission, which is providing family support services and care for persons of all ages who have physical and intellectual disabilities, to enable them to remain in their chosen community. So the First Mennonite Church actually donated the house that's on the left to the moms group. And at this time, Birdie became the executive director of Agape. So she was the lead person at that point. The community came together in multiple ways. Churches donated money, individuals in the community donated money. People donated their time, their skills and effort to install a ramp, to make the house accessible. So respite started out of this house, and in the beginning, they only provided daytime and nighttime respite hours to the families, and it was private pay. They didn't turn anyone away for payment if they were not able to afford. They early on started a benevolence fund so that they could help all families. They didn't want anybody to be turned away. For the first year, that worked well, and then other families, as your needs changed, started asking questions about, well, could we do in-home and could we do overnights? And so that began after the first year, just a little bit here and there, a few hours of service a year, and they started to outgrow the house, close to 10 years. So they had to come up with a plan of how they were going to replicate what they already had, and still make it a home-like feel for out-of-home respite. They didn't want anything clinical or institutionalized looking. So Birdie set out and started a capital campaign and received hundreds of donors and people that were behind the initiative to build the new respite home. The land for the home was donated from a retirement community that's just close by to us. So we have access to walkways and little scenic ponds and stuff to take walks and stuff. So it's very accessible to the community. So in 2001, that project began. And in 2002, we opened our new respite home that we have been providing services for. We're going into our 29th year. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So I'm just going to take you on a little tour of what the inside of our respite home looks like. We have 2 accessible restrooms. One is a shower room that also has a shower chair if needed and a bench. The other one we tease and say is our Lamborghini bathtub because the door opens like a Lamborghini, has jets inside of it if a guest likes that. But ergonomically, it also moves up and down to the direct support professionals level. So there's no back strain, also easy access for the individuals taking the bath to enter and get out of the tub. It has its own sanitizing system, which we love that aspect of it. We have 4 bedrooms, but we have 7 beds with 4 different types of beds. We have hospital beds, a veiled bed, a crib bed, and also a twin bed. That way we're accessible to multiple types of sleep patterns and needs. We have a full kitchen and dining area. We provide 3 meals a day if needed. And then we have a great room. And in 2011, we needed a little more space. And if you can see in the great room, the ceilings are cathedral, so it's kind of echoey in there. So when the all seasons room was put on in 2011, there's actually, you can kind of see them in the picture, there's clouds that hang from the ceiling, and they're actually sound barriers. So that room's a little more peaceful and quiet, and those who enjoy the echo of their voice can enjoy it out in the great room, and those who like a little more peaceful atmosphere can be in the all seasons room. The all season room has a door that goes out into our gated, accessible, and adaptable play equipment. So we have a playground out there that has swings and a jungle gym, and the floor is actually the tire that has a mat over it, like the rubber tire shreds. So very safe and easy to get wheelchairs on and off of, and a water table. So we allow our guests to stay 2 hours up to a 10-day stay that are on the Medicaid waiver. We also allow this for families that are private pay. As I mentioned, we have the benevolence fund, and we utilize those funds for guests that are enrolled in our services. Just make sure I'm not missing anything. Go ahead to the next slide. The next slide is photos of individuals that utilize our services. And I just kind of want to talk to you about the friendships that are made between not only our direct support professionals, our office manager and I, but also with each other. The picture on the top left, they've become really good friends, and to the point to where the one gal loves pushing the other gal around in the house. And down on the lower right hand is actually one of our DSP's grandbaby, who had a diagnosis of Down syndrome and came for a visit. And so our guest just embraced him and all took turns getting to coddle over him. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our intake process and how these individuals get to become affiliated with Agape. By that process, it usually starts with either a phone call from the family member, the guardian, or a case manager asking about our services. Once that process takes place, I send an intake packet out to the families where I accumulate all the information to take care of their loved one from the time they wake up in the morning until they go to bed at night. If you want to flip to the next slide, Cass. I did include, we have a leaflet packet, but we also have a seizure risk plan paper that we send out, emergency form that we also send out. But this leaflet packet, each title flips open, and it can be, we ask for descriptive information on what those areas look like for their loved one. Once I accumulate that information and get the individual support plan from the case manager, any risk plans that are available or any behavior support plan that's available, I put together a file or start putting together the file for the individual. We invite the whole family, whoever wants to come, to take a tour of Agape. At that time, we set up a 4-hour session, not really session, but break for the family so that we can get acquainted with the individual utilizing our services. That's at no cost to the family. It's just a trial stay, gives the DSPs time to ask questions. Are we doing this right? We ask the family to stay by locally. And so I encourage our staff to write in the charts of the individuals, because they're out there and they see things that I didn't see in the intake process. So those are constantly updated for the staff to be educated. During the intake process, a tour takes place, but I also, if there's something that we're not familiar with, we encourage families to write out a care plan of what something looks like. If a seizure is not typical of what we would be familiar with, sometimes we encourage videos on positioning. How do they position their loved one at home? How can we replicate that at our respite house? And those will be included in the training process for each individual. And we will also include photos in the individual's chart here at Agape. We always like to list individuals' diagnosis last in their file, because we like to serve individuals based on who they are and not on a diagnosis. Everyone's different. So I think it's important for all of us to recognize that in the care that we give. Some of the activities that take place at Agape are very individualized per the individual, but we do puzzles, cards, we do the accessible playground. Some individuals have permission to go do the Agape grocery shopping. So they get to go for car rides to a surrounding town and go help with the Agape groceries. And they help put groceries away when they get back. They look forward to that. We have 2 adaptive bikes. So in the summertime, we utilize those bikes and go around in the community. And then we also do music. And then sometimes there's an accessible movie theater that's in Decatur, Indiana, not far from us. So we also take individuals to see the movie sometimes. And then we also have basketball. So, but the friendships that are made, there's really nothing like it. And the families, you see that apprehension in the beginning when they come for the tour, and then after the first 4-hour visit. And if they want to do an overnight, we offer a 1-night overnight just as a trial run that before we extend to the 10-day stay. Individuals, if they do have a family emergency or they need more than 10 days, we do allow for that as long as the family writes a letter to our board of directors, and that can be approved for an extended stay beyond the 10 days, as long as we have room. You could go ahead to the next slide. As you can see, it's just a place to never outgrow. These are young pictures of individuals that we served early on in the beginning of Agape, and then Cass has their more adult pictures now. So the longevity of our guests and the families we serve speaks volumes, I think, for the quality of care that our direct support professionals give. The relationship between the direct support professionals and the families is so important because our office manager and I aren't out there every single time a guest is dropped off to stay. We're not out there when they go home. Our staff keep the families very informed. We have a charting system, which is a little unique, I think, to technology today. We still use carbon copy charting. So our staff every shift document when they use the restroom, how much they had to eat, did they have a bath or did they have a shower, did they tolerate it, what percentage of their food did they eat, did they go out into the community today, what kind of activities were they engaged in, were they engaged with other guests, were they engaged with other staff. We have goals for everyone. Usually it's leisure and recreation. However, sometimes if individuals are using PAC services, then we might work on fine motor skills. Those are all recognized throughout the charting so that families can see where those goals were met. We put a little asterisk star so that it's highlighted to show where the goals were met. And so not only is it a great tool for the staff to communicate with the parents or the guardians, but it's also a great tool for when the family gets home to communicate with their child. So I see you did this today, or what did you think about this? Or if they tried new things, that's another area that I encourage staff, to write in those charts of the summary page that I make from the time they get up till the time they go to bed. Did we try a new activity? How did they like it? Did they dislike it? We want to meet their likes and dislikes. We want everybody to have a peaceful time while they're here because it is a vacation away from their family while their family's having a needed break. You could go, and also part of the lifespan respite, where the moms group wanted to make sure that everyone was served. We do provide lifespan just because we do recognize that disability can come from birth. It can come from an automobile accident or some other kind of accident, but it also could be part of an aging process. So we just like to ensure that we reach out to our elderly community and just make sure that they know, if they have a loved one that has dementia, and they still are able to go and do their grocery shopping or attend church, we do provide respite services for a few hours to their loved one as well. And it's kind of fun watching the younger kids that utilize respite services with the older generation and just watching them intertwine with one another, very rewarding. So on this slide, I just wanted to discuss a little bit about succession planning and sustainability. So I started at Agape as a direct support professional back in 2002. And the top left picture is actually myself with my premature son, Jacob. He was born 27 and a half weeks. And I always had been a factory worker and wasn't really sure what my future looked like because I had a 3-year-old daughter at home as well. After 4.5 months in the hospital, he came home with a feeding tube, oxygen, a heart monitor, and a scared mom who was trained on all of his needs, but I was by no means a nurse yet. So I saw an ad for Agape in our local newspaper, and I called Bertie Lehman, and I'd only been home a month with him. And so I called Bertie, and she asked me to come in and fill out an application. So I did. And she hired me on the spot. And of course, tears, because I'd never done anything like this before. And I said, I don't even have a babysitter, and my husband doesn't even know I'm here. So she said I would bring my son with me to Agape. So I did for several years. The middle picture is me as a direct care professional, and Bertie's daughter, Jessica. So I had the reward of caring for her daughter. And so when the succession came about, Bertie and I didn't really realize that God already had a plan in place. She said she had been praying about it and planning to retire after her 25 years of dedication as the director. And she said she was praying, and my name kept popping into her head. And so me, along with 2 other applicants, applied for the position, and I was able to come full circle with my greatest mentor and the place that stole my heart in 2002, so to become the director. So for us being a small community, a small service provider, the succession plan was very important to us, even going forward. And then looking at our staff in the bottom picture, there's 20 of us now. And of those 20, 5 of them have worked for Agape between 15 and 26 years. Up in the top right picture, all the way to the left, is Jennifer to Shannon. I like to mention her because she's such a key person to what we do here. She's our office and house manager, and she's been with Agape 26 of the 28 years we've been in service. She does all of the staff scheduling. She does all of the family scheduling. And honestly, the way she has it as a fine oiled machine of some sort, she knows what guests are compatible with who are not. It's first come, first serve as far as scheduling. So she takes all of that into consideration. We do have wait lists sometimes, but she's able, if somebody cancels, to put somebody right in. She knows what beds everyone sleeps in. It's just remarkable. So yeah, we have to figure her out going forward because she's such a great asset to Agape. And then our staff down below, like I said, 15 to 26 years, 5 of our staff. And I always say that I like to say that it's because we send them birthday cards every year, or we celebrate Direct Support Professional Week. But honestly, it's just their heart and their dedication and the family connection that they have, the autonomy that they've been given to nurture and create those trusting relationships. The rest of the staff, really 5 to 10 years, I would say, have been on board with us. When we look for staff, honestly, we advertise as someone with a caring, genuine heart for others in need. We hire individuals that have absolutely no experience whatsoever, because you can't teach the heart to care and to be compassionate, but you can teach every hands-on skill that's required to care for these individuals between our training and then also the family's training. You can go ahead to the next slide. Outside of our respite, we do some in-home respite. However, we do ask the families to send us the individual that they want to care for their loved one, and then we go through the hiring process, the training process, and keep them up to date. We have grandparents, siblings who care for their individual loved ones in home. That's not as our out-of-home respite. We do have individuals come from all over Indiana now to have respite services. They'll drive 2 to 3 hours to get here. So that's rewarding to be able to go outside of our community and do that. Outside of that respite, we wanted to include others in the community who don't utilize our respite. So back in 2003, we created a baseball league, started out with 2. We now have 5 teams. And in the beginning, families were the volunteers, and they would take their loved ones around the bases and help them hit the ball and do the fielding. However, now we have the Summit City Sluggers for over 10 years from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and they come down in July. We play 2 nights a week, 5 teams, a little over 50 players, And they are volunteers, they are friends. So many great connections have been made between this baseball team and the individuals that participate in the baseball league. So now it's a unique type of respite for these families. Their children get to play in an organized sport and they get to sit in the stands. Our local school here volunteers their baseball diamond to us. We have an adaptive bat that for those individuals that can't use their hands, it actually pulls back and it swings and hits the ball off the tee for the individuals. So it's just exciting. Everyone can be included. And then in 2008, we started a bowling league, and that happens in April every Tuesday night here at our local bowling alley. They set off time for us to come in and have our league, just like all the other leagues. It's actually a buddy bowling, so they're not pictured with all of our bowlers, but they actually had a friend from school or a family member or somebody bowling with them. And the baseball is no cost to the families. It's all donations from our community and our concession stand. And then the bowling is $2.50 per game for our bowlers. So it's very minimal cost and very inclusive into our community and an exciting time. Last year, we were able, not last year, 2 years ago, we were able to utilize our community foundation and wrote a grant for bowling ramps for our bowling program. And then at the end of both of these sports leagues, we have a banquet where families are invited to come. They can invite anyone they want. We just need a head count, and we bring food and we give awards out and certificates. We have an open mic session where parents and the players can actually get up and speak and talk about what the season meant to them. And there's usually not a dry eye for that session. That is just very rewarding. You can go to the, oh, I was going to say that COVID did keep us from having both of those last year, and we're not looking to get rid of them, and hoping, really hoping and crossing our fingers that we're able to go forward this year with both of those programs. Jennifer and I volunteer all of our time along with the City Sluggers, so it's exciting for us, the planning of it all. And then lastly, I just want to talk to everyone about accountability, partnership, and transparency in order to have those trusting relationships with our families, with stakeholders, donors, and the community, just to know that we are doing our part to be compliant. I think relationships and partnerships with like your local United Way, your community foundations are critical to be able to write grants if you're a nonprofit. For us, we are fortunate to have 2 endowment funds so that if something would happen to governmental fundings, we have a backup plan. And I would just encourage people to have a backup plan of going forward because we're so, I mean, 90% of our funds come from state funding. And so when you think of us doing out of home, we still have all of our utilities to pay for, the food that we provide to our guests. We supply all of that. So having our donors and stuff is critical to the care that we provide to the individuals in our community. We also use certified public accountants to certify and do our taxes every year for our credibility. Our insurance plans are important just to know that people are protected under the care of our services. And then the Michael Burns and Consultants is our plans going forward. So we use them just so they have a second set of eyes so that they can keep us accountable in our plans going forward. And at this time, I'm just going to go to the next slide and just thank Jill, Cassandra, and Susan again for having us, and what an honor it was to be able to be represented at the 2019 National Arch in Buffalo. So thank you guys. I'll answer any questions at the end.
Thank you, Sherry. And now we're ready for Fran and Kelly.
And you might be on mute if you're speaking, Fran or Kelly.
I am on mute. Look at that. See, we still haven't gotten used to all of this virtual stuff. Thank you so much for having us. I feel so honored to be in a meeting with so many amazing people, and all the amazing things that you do is really inspiring. So My name is Kelly Servodio. I'm the Director of Community Outreach, Community Relations and Outreach at Caregiver Volunteers of Central Jersey. Fran and I are going to tag team this. So I'm going to tell you real quick about Caregiver Volunteers. We are an interfaith nonprofit agency, and we provide free support services to the frail and elderly and homebound seniors so they can live independently with dignity in their own homes for as long as possible. Our Alzheimer's Respite Care program started in 2002. So Caregiver Volunteers started in 1993, and the ARCP program was started in 2002. It is a program of our Caregiver Volunteers overall program. And the mission of the ARCP program is to ease the burden and enhance the quality of life for the primary caregivers of a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia by matching them with trained volunteers to provide respite care in the form of socialization, transportation, education, and emotional support. Our secondary goal is to educate the senior community and professionals who care for seniors about dementia, specifically of the importance of early diagnosis, treatment, and the most effective communication techniques with an individual with dementia. We have a quick little video. Peggy, one of our care receivers, really puts everything that we do into such amazing words. So I'm going to let her do it.
Can't hear it. I can't hear it.
We're not hearing it, Cassandra.
To see him this way because he
Does
was
that work?
always very active, worked very hard. He was a plumber, and he doesn't understand what's going on. He's become my other child. I have to dress him, and sometimes I lose it. My patience. I lose my patience because he doesn't know to get him into the bathroom. It's very difficult to turn him, you know, and they'll grab my hand. He's very strong. He is very strong. And I'll say, let go, you know, and he doesn't know. He doesn't know. When he came home from rehab, a social worker came and told us about caregivers. And then we got Charlotte. And she's been like, she is so funny. I love her. We have a great relationship. And she'll say to me, she'll come in, just go, just go. For me, it absolutely meant that I could get out of the house by myself. And I feel very safe with her. She's very kind to him. To get a break for even once a week is like, I can't even describe it. Now, my children are having a very difficult time. They could not do what she does for me. I feel so safe, and it's just a wonderful feeling that she's so caring. This program has been, it's hard to describe because I've been so fortunate to get the likes of Charlotte, and I'm sure anybody who's in this program is a Charlotte. There's got to be tons of people who need the likes of Charlotte, and we need your donations, period.
Thank you so much.
You can go to the next slide. So thank you so much. My name is Fran again. I hope everybody got to see that. I know mine was it was a little broken up, but I still was able to hear lovely Peggy. And thanks to Peggy, because that is a perfect example of what our program is all about. I use that video very, very often in the community and trainings. None of us could explain what we do the way Peggy did. She offered to do that for us actually, and was honored at a benefit event we had that was a fundraiser, which is why she ended it with asking for donations. She was great. So in addition to providing relief, resources, and support, in the words of one of our volunteers who said, she gave me my life back and my hope. And you heard Peggy say, my children cannot do what Charlotte does. And those two sayings, I think, really, really exemplify what it is that we do for our families. Our Alzheimer's respite care program uses nationally recognized approaches to dementia support. Examples are the Best Friends approach, Teepa Snow's positive approach to care, Rosalind Carter Institute's dealing with dementia program, and things like validation theory for all of our protocols and how we interact with our families, our care receivers, and our volunteers. An example of why the Best Friends approach is so important is that it focuses on life's story, knowing a person with dementia's story and accepting the person with dementia as a human being first instead of seeing the diagnosis first. Over the years, we've refined our process and continue to make changes as needed to coincide with the changes we see in the community. And no matter the changes, the main theme in everything we do is to see each situation individually and then apply those person-centered practices at all times. It is entwined in our program in every single aspect and throughout the process. Starting with the first contact with a family member through our match process and in our initial and ongoing volunteer training. We believe that in bringing joy and connection to the person with dementia, our family member not only gets their precious time off for those few hours a week, but also receives the peace of mind in knowing that their loved one is respected, supported, and is seen as that person that they still are inside, which is something that a family member living with someone with dementia can sometimes not really get to see anymore. We continually conduct quality control activities through regular follow-up phone calls, emails. We do revisits if requested based on preferences of families. We do monthly reporting from our volunteers. We have meetings with them, calls, emails, online reporting of hours. And our volunteers share the important piece of information of what the caregiver is doing during the time that they are with them. And that is a very important data that we've begun collecting over the past couple of years versus what the person may have told us that they wanted to do when we first met them during our assessment. We continually update our resources. We provide local and national resources to our families in various ways. We give them printed lists. We have an annual resource event. We connect them to our county office on aging. We provide educational events, webinars. We have printed materials for our families that we also use in the community. And with increased use of technologies by our families now due to COVID, we're also now creating an online resource for our families to access. We've also created a manual that has been adapted over the past year to reflect the new technology we are now using. And even with our staff, we make sure that each service area has one staff member that handles everything from the beginning of the process through to the match and ongoing, so that there's always that one person who absolutely knows the person, knows the family, and sees it through. Each of our managers is a certified dementia practitioner and has experience either as a nurse, a social worker, a care manager, or a dementia manager. And all participate in annual continuing education and any kind of dementia education programs that we can find. You can move on to the next. Oh wait, before I leave, I'll tell you these three people we have here. On the right side, you see Jeff and Bernie. This is really kind of to show you a little bit that we don't have a one size fits all even with our respite receivers. The man in the purple shirt is Jeff, and he is someone with young onset Alzheimer's. He's 57 years old. Our usual receiver in our program are usually older. It's either a daughter or a son that's the caregiver, and usually an elderly. For the most part, they're elderly, but we have been getting a lot younger receivers over the past couple of years. Jeff is one of them, and he and Bernie, although he's still able to do a lot. Jeff, he's actually an Alzheimer's Association advocate, and he does a lot for the community on his own. It's not that his wife is literally caregiving for him, but to have the peace of mind that now he's been developing this friendship with someone who is almost his own age. Bernie, our volunteer, has been such a joy to his wife that she knows now as he does get worse over the years coming. He has this friend who understands and is becoming his best friend, literally. They go out for coffee, they go for walks, a little bit different than maybe a normal respite that you might see, but that's just shows you how that's our innovative approach, is that we want to see each as it comes. In the middle, you have a volunteer who's 92 years old. The lady that's, well, they're both laughing. The lady with the stripes has dementia, and Grace, our volunteer, is the other lady, and she's a trip. She's fabulous, and she can't imagine life without having this volunteer opportunity that she has to make a difference. She says, what's life for if I'm not doing this? And then on the other side, we have an intergenerational connection here through our Connect Through Music program. And that's Lois and Camille, and they share the music that Lois loved through her life. So that's also not a traditional respite. That's just more of sort of an enhancement to our Alzheimer's respite program. So you can go to the next one. Here we're talking a little bit about our relationship with our families and how we adapt to the changing needs of our receivers. So in order to develop a real relationship with the family, we need to begin the process, and that begins on our first phone call. And so we call it our intake call. That could last maybe about a half hour. We're usually receiving our referrals either if someone heard about us and the individual's calling who's the caregiver, or they've been sent to us through a social worker who may have been in the house, probably after a hospitalization and a rehab stay, and social worker brings services into the house. And when the services finish during that time, they've recognized that we have a caregiver situation, and sometimes we'll get our referral that way. So we'll spend some time just getting to know them, seeking to understand the situation and determine if at that time an assessment is warranted. If it's not, if we don't feel that it's inappropriate for a respite case, then we'll connect them to our vast community resources that may be able to help them. We would never just say we can't help you. At least we get them to the statewide respite program or some other county services. Then the next step is the one that we really spend the most time in, and it's our in-home assessment. Being in the home, as you could see when you were watching the video of Peggy, that home almost told the whole story kind of Mike, her husband, with all of his little toys that he had on his wall. And he was a sailor, and he was a fireman, and he had all these things all around the house. So it was a real, and of course, Peggy was so outgoing and easy to talk to. That was an easy way to find out our life story and to see the function of Mike while we were in the house. Sometimes it's not so easy, but either way, we'll spend a couple of hours, and our program is a social program. I think when we started way back in 2002, it was a little bit more of a medical model. We learned a little bit more of the medical needs, and we are now really moving away from that, and we are really 100% social model. We do need to know, however, and which is why our staff really needs to be educated in their functional needs. Although the type of dementia doesn't always matter, we are looking for that sort of information if a family member even knows. We really need to know their preferences, whether they hear well or see well, so that when we train our volunteer to interact with this person, they're going to have all the tools that they can have in their toolkit to be able to connect as much as we can to make that connection with our volunteer and our receiver is where we get the most success out of the program. So we do all that, then we go through our match process. In the match process, we take our volunteers, the in-depth information we have on our volunteers and on our receiver, and in addition to geography, where maybe the volunteer lives, the time of day that the family member needs a respite, the day of the week that works best with them. And it's sort of like a matchmaking process at this point. How can we best fit as many of those preferences as possible? And you'll see in some of these pictures, they're not all the same either. At the top left, we have actually two volunteers with the one woman, and they kind of tag team. The one will take 1 week and the other will take another week. That worked out great for the family. It works out great for the volunteers. And she gets to have two best friends, and it created a successful match. On the bottom left, you have Grace, and the woman with the headset on. She's was very young. She's only in her 50s, and she had a very, very severe frontotemporal dementia, and her husband, John, was amazing. And when I spent my 2-hour assessment with them, I was unsure of how I would be able to find a volunteer who would be able to meet the needs of of Gloria because of her, she had some, they call it pseudobobic complex, where she would be yelling out during the day kind of often and walk around so much. But then this angel, we called her Grace, came to volunteer for us, who had just retired as a nurse, doing dementia care her whole life. And she's this kind, sweet, gentle woman. And when we did what I'm going to talk to you about next, which is our introduction visit, one of the staff goes with the chosen volunteer to the house at an agreed to time, and we sit for about a half hour and we introduce them to the family, to the caregiver, to the receiver, and we see, is this, maybe, is this going to work? And as a staff, we are there to sort of facilitate that with the understanding that we have of both sides, maybe bring up some of the subjects. Do you like music too? Mary likes music, or whatever it is. And it turned out that Grace, they connected immediately. She actually sang some music to her, and it calmed her down. And we knew that that was going to be a great match. And John, her husband, was so thrilled that there was another young woman, maybe she also felt like they were close in age, that she was a real friend to her. And they stayed together for a couple of years until she recently passed away. So that was really a wonderful example. And then once that match visit is completed, and they have an agreed upon day every Wednesday at 2, I'll be there at 2 o'clock and stay. Then we follow up after the first couple of weeks to see how things are going. Is there anything else we can support them with? And if that goes well, then our volunteer will just continue on that process ongoing. And then we will on an ongoing basis continue to follow up at least every 6 months, and usually more time. Because we seek to support our families in many ways, we cooperate with with other service areas that we have within caregiver volunteers. Our organization has no financial requirements, so it's free to anybody who needs us. Unless the person has a live-in caregiver, we triage our wait list, and we always have a wait list, unfortunately, based on need. We are usually called by those not able to receive social services, for the most part, like Medicaid, but who also can't afford to pay for care. That's usually our biggest bulk of the people that we care for. They're the ones that kind of fall through the cracks. And we have so many needy people in our area. The need is growing. And we really utilize the power of the life story. And that means really understanding and seeing the situation as the unique opportunity it is to support that family. We find out things like what type of music, foods, travel they liked, hobbies, their family history, jobs, travel, all sorts of things. And then we can make more matches like you see on the screen. Way in the center at the top is Mario and Frank. Mario and Frank are both veterans, so that was, we use our veteran outreach coordinator within our organization to help us find sometimes a suitable match. Would they want to do respite? And then they would go through the training. And for the same individual, Mario, if you look to the side, you see him with a pair of headsets on, and that's one of our young student volunteers, Kenley. And Kenley and Mario were also part of the match. So Mario had 2 volunteers to help with the respite for his family. And he loved Sinatra, and he would tell her stories of when he was in World War II. And actually they got featured on a local newspaper, did a great article on them around Memorial Day. Then at the bottom, you have a multicultural match. We also have a multicultural outreach coordinator within our organization, that when we have someone who speaks a different language or really would do well with a cultural connection, and we have one, then we'll absolutely jump on that. So this sweetheart of a gentleman was from Puerto Rico, and he was just only speaking Spanish at this point. And he was so thrilled that he was able to get a Spanish speaking volunteer, and she would bring her son every week, and they would make something to eat that was, with Puerto Rican flair, where she'd bring books and all sort of maps and things about, their culture together. And so that was an amazing match as well. We can also connect our receivers if they need it to some of the other things like food shopping. If they're unable to drive and they need help food shopping, we can do that for them. We can provide transportation services. And now we're also looking for the future to add things, some social visits to our program for art enrichment, and hopefully starting a memory cafe by the year's end. You can go to the next slide. You can go to the next slide, thanks. So our volunteers are the key to this whole thing. What would we do with our amazing volunteers? They're the key, we call it, and keeping connected to them is the key to keeping them to keep coming back and to really being part of this. We support them to keep connected to their receivers. The more we can to support them to show them how to connect, the better they feel about what they're doing. The process with our volunteers mirrors the process that we use for our caregiving families, so that we can build our relationship with our volunteers. Unfortunately, we belong to this larger organization that's been around for 25 years. It's an interfaith organization and has a wonderful process for recruiting volunteers to come into our program, and they get oriented to our larger organization. From that provides us with a steady flow of people who are interested in learning about our respite program. Then we have them participate in a 2-hour workshop that we teach them all that they would need to know to be a respite volunteer, and that includes interactive hands-on. We use video, PowerPoint, discussion, we do sharing, and we also keep a resource library for all of our volunteers if they want to learn more than the basic dementia information that we share. And that's when we bring in a lot of our the nationally recognized programs I talked to in the beginning, like our Best Friends approach and our positive approach to care. We really bring that into all of our training, and then ongoing over our monthly meetings with our volunteers as well, so that they're always feeling that they know the latest of what's going on, and how they can better understand as their receiver, we call them care receivers, as their care receivers decline in the disease process, they really want to learn more about what's happening and how to best interact with them, so that, again, their family member feels comfortable and confident going out of the house and leaving, because they know that this best friend of theirs, their volunteer who they love, is with their loved one. It's a peace of mind that they can't even describe sometimes. We seek to learn our volunteers' life stories as well, not only for using in our matching process, but just that we also get to know them, because we revere our volunteers so much. And the close relationship that we build with all of them helps us know how to celebrate them as well. For their birthdays, we want to celebrate their successes. If they ever have a need in their own family, we're there for them as well. We invite our volunteer to participate in all events that we do. We identify them with awards when appropriate. We do fun giveaways for them, like the one in the photo actually with the little bear. Every year we have, for our volunteer appreciation, we name another bear, another care bear after one of our volunteers. And this year, of course, it's outside because of COVID. So we had to have a grab and go to give them their items instead of us all getting together, but we figured it out. Our volunteers also feel that they are part of something bigger than themselves. They bond with each other, and they really feel an ownership in the success of our program. And we want them to feel comfortable with that. And they support our mission for us out in the community. As often as we go out there, they'll man tables, they'll talk about it, they'll help us share what they're going through. We hold an annual volunteer luncheon for our respite members, in addition to a larger celebration that we have with all of the volunteers in our board of directors and all of our families. So because of this focus on volunteers, we have volunteers who have been with us since the beginning. Our oldest ones are in their 90s. And you saw Peggy from the beginning of video. Peggy, that her husband sadly passed away. Peggy is now a respite volunteer for another family. So, I mean, you can't do better than that. So it looks like I'm already on the next slide. So here I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we adapted to COVID, because we used our same person-centered approach to how we dealt with COVID the way we do with everything else. I think that's what drives us, and that's what keeps us focused. That if we always think that we're doing what we have to do for the people that we're serving as individuals, it takes us through whatever kind of challenges that we're facing. And 2020 brought us many challenges from the start. She's not with us right now, but Megan O'Keefe came on as our new executive director in the beginning of 2020. She was just starting to get her feet wet and COVID hit. And the resulting lockdown, in the area we live in, we have an unbelievable number of people over the age of 65 in our area, and we help a lot of them with a lot of things besides our respite. So initially, we were shut down. Our volunteers were all at home, so people that were depending on us had no one to reach out to, and our caregiving families, like the other presenters here, caregivers are especially impacted by what's happening with COVID. Without their places to take their loved ones, they're 24/7 stuck in their house. Caregiving that's a burden that we can only imagine what it must be like. So we just started out by calling all of our receivers and volunteers for the immediate needs at first. Some needed just food those first few weeks, and then as the time went on, we continued with weekly phone calls by staff, and then over time converted to our volunteers getting back in, some feeling more comfortable to actually go to a house, some people doing things by phone. But many of our volunteers during the summer especially were starting their respite visits by phone, starting to use technology, learning how to use Zoom or FaceTime or whatever they could figure out how to use. We even held that's a picture of our monthly support group that we give our volunteers. We did it outside in a parking lot so that we can connect with each other. And our volunteers really need that. They really, really appreciate our monthly support group. It really makes them feel like they're a community. Not only do we provide education during this monthly group with our volunteers, but this is their roundtable time when they can share what's going on with the person that they're their receiver, and just becoming friends, actually. So that's a really important thing we hated to have to give up. So now that it's winter, we're back doing it on Zoom, but whatever works best, we just keep adapting. Some of our volunteers have been starting to go back using precautions now, especially with some vaccines. We're hoping that over the next few months more will feel comfortable. And if they don't, that's okay. They can do it however they're able to do it. Our assessment process was also adapted to use technology. And now we're kind of have a hybrid on how we do our home assessments. We're doing some of it over the phone or on Skype or FaceTime or however. And then our staff will go to the house and spend, at least 15 minutes, using PPEs, just to make sure that they have to be able to see the environment that the volunteer is going to be going in. And that's really the best way for us really to learn as much as possible. And we will go back and revisit all of these matches that we're making during COVID time when it's all over, so that we can go back at home and see how things are going. You see a picture of a young man on his computer, and that's because we also did a virtual Connect Through Music program with some seniors, some elders in the area. This young man got to know a man, John, he was a music teacher, and he loves music. So the two of them are talking music, I think, in that picture. We added a new family weekly e-blast. We've been offering virtual entertainment programs, and in spite of all the limitations, and at the top, that's Jeff and Bernie again. In spite of all the limitations for in-person respite, we've still been able to support 50 families, providing 700 hours of service since last March. Now, I think we have just 2 more slides.
Fran, this is Susan. I know I'm interrupting you, but we're kind of running out of time.
Oh,
so I'll let you have a few words.
Okay, wrap it up then.
I just wanted to let everyone know that the recording will be on the Arch website, and that I urge you to look at the websites of all the 3 programs. You can find that also, the links to the Arch websites. Cassandra and I will be sharing more information about innovative and exemplary programs at the ISPA conference in June, which I hope you all are registered to attend. And I'm going to give Fran the last word, but I just want to state the obvious here. These programs are highly professional, highly effective, highly rigorous, never officious, never bureaucratic, so socially warm. When I interviewed them, the interviews were supposed to last a half an hour. They almost all went well over an hour. So just so you will know, and here we are again. There's so much to learn from these women. Fran, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to
That's
let
okay.
you
I'll
finish your last slide. And then if people want to stay for questions, we're here. And if not, please let us start a dialogue through email, or if you want us Arch to organize a roundtable of programs and people with questions, we can do things like that too. And again, Fran, sorry for the interruption.
No,
Thank
that's
you.
okay.
Thank you to all of you, and I'll let Fran
And
wrap the
And
presentation.
I'm gonna sneak in, Fran, your final video, we can send them a link. if
Okay,
that's-
that's fine. That's fine. I'll finish up, Kelly. Okay, this is really just information just to reiterate what the other presenter said. We have to be connected to our community as well for a successful program, using our partners in order to keep ourselves sustaining. And that's what we do, just the same as, you know, everybody else. Community connections, just like all of our other connections, are important. That's how we stay funded. That's how we stay out there. That's how we keep connected to the community as a whole. But thank you very much. You'll have my email and our website. Anybody can reach out to us anytime for information. I think Kelly just put it out there. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you. And here's the video, and you'll get a link to it. It will have it on the website.
And Barb, if people can stay just for a minute, Barb, there was a question for you, Barb Williams at Child Serve, about weekend and overnight stays, and how actually Mary Ellen Jones, if you're Mary Ellen, if you're still on, you can ask Barb directly, and Barb, you'll have to unmute.
There was also another question about providing support to family friends. So I don't know if
Yeah,
that
thank
person
you.
wants to stay on. And I have information about pandemic services during the pandemic too. Somebody had asked that, I think, but
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, this is Mary Ellen Jones. I'm from Stonebelt in Bloomington, Indiana. So I just was curious about your overnights and on the weekends. So do you host those like out of a day service program and turn it into like a weekend place, or do you have a place specifically for like your overnights?
So in our Johnston location, we do have a center. Part of our center is a day program during the day, during the week. And then on the weekends, we have Murphy beds and we have other portable beds that we use. And we have a kitchen area here in the center and accessible bathrooms. So we do use that for overnight stays here on the weekends.
Thank you. That's just what I was wondering. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Barb, do you want to talk a little bit about your response to COVID? We would love to hear that.
Yes, so really throughout the pandemic, we've continued to provide one-on-one respite in a family's home, as long as both the family and the caregiver felt comfortable with that. And that's where I mentioned that we continue to check in with families, because we know 1 month, we saw families at the beginning saying, no, I don't really need respite right now. And then a few months into the pandemic, they were, yes, now I need some help, I need some services. So our staff that weren't able to get hours with us, we deployed them to other service areas within Child Serve until we had those hours back, and we had families wanting to use respite again. And so we just continue to make sure everybody's comfortable. We have a screening process that we do through SurveyMonkey, where staff answer a few questions just to make sure that they aren't having any symptoms, that they don't think they've been exposed to COVID. They take their temperature before they do any shift. So at least once a day they're screening any day that they're working. For our group services, we did have to suspend those for a number of reasons. We just weren't able to feel like we could safely do those. We didn't want to bring people together in a group situation for the first few months, but then we quickly realized that that was a valuable service and we needed to figure out how to do that. So we have implemented the same screening procedures for that. We have masking requirements of staff working in groups have to mask at all times. We did change those groups so that they were smaller in size, and also children with more complex medical diagnosis, underlying health conditions that would make them more susceptible at a higher risk for COVID, then we're not inviting them to groups right now. We're working to get them back into that. So we had to make a few modifications, but it was important to get those groups back in place for those that we could help with that. So really, we have additional cleaning protocols too for all of our services. So really screening, masking, and cleaning, some additional procedures that all of our staff are following just to make everybody feel more comfortable. We're lucky at ChildServe, we have a COVID team that's dedicated to some of their time each day to work on COVID related issues. And so they help us figure out, we have a very kind of complex rubric of if somebody has symptoms and they test positive, this is when they can come back to services or back to work. If somebody, tests negative, then this is how long they have to stay out. So we're just following that, trying to keep it consistent for everybody. A couple of other things that we changed because of the pandemic is we do interviews over Zoom and FaceTime. We also will enroll children into our service over Zoom or FaceTime. So that really helps to be able to minimize everybody's in-person contact. We know with the hiring process, there still are some steps that have to be done in person. And so we've tried to be creative on how to do that, again, to minimize that contact. But we are providing training virtually. We haven't really gone back to any in-person trainings at this point yet. And again, hiring, enrolling is all virtual as well.
You're impressive. I think that's really wonderful. I'm struck again about how responsive the respite field as a whole has been to caregivers during COVID, when so many different organizations and institutions are struggling to figure things out. Respite providers, I don't know what explains it, but have really adapted quickly and we hope effectively, and have been really responsive to families. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Does anyone have questions they would like to ask of Barb or Sherry or Fran or Kelly before we thank you and sign off? Thanks for staying late, those of you who have. Thank you to our wonderful presenters, and thank you so much for the work you do in your programs.
I just wanted to ask Barb about what she does to support people like grandparents or neighbours or friends who are delivering respite to family members.
Yes, definitely. That's a big part of our individual respite program, as I mentioned. And so we work with families upon enrollment, and then we check in with them periodically to see if they have anybody that they want to refer to us. They still have to apply. We still want them to feel like it's a job for them because they are representing ChildServe and they're providing care through us. So we want still, we still do background checks and those kinds of things that are required. Some of the training is a little bit different for a family friend because we allow them to come on and only work with that one child. Usually if somebody's applying just for kind of a general position, we'll want them maybe to work so many hours a month, or we'll maybe want them to work a group, or we try to figure out where they're going to be a good fit. But if it's a family friend, we don't really have any of those same requirements. We make them do required trainings like mandatory reporter, for example, and some of those things. But we allow them to do some specialty kinds of care. For example, if if they're working with a child that they're already familiar with, and that child has maybe needs to use a G-tube for feedings, then we'll work with them so that they can demonstrate to us that they know how to do it, and then we don't require them to show ongoing competencies with that. We still require them to document the service, and we do check in with that family friend and the family, because sometimes you know, it's really hard for a family member. Maybe they're not feeling comfortable doing the service anymore, or they don't have time for it. So we need to be watching and making sure that that respite's still happening, because we don't want a situation where they just kind of fade away and then the family doesn't know why, and they don't feel like they can come to us and ask for another staff. So we're always checking in to make sure that that arrangement's still working. And we also want to make sure that families aren't missing out on other opportunities, kind of like Aiden, whose picture I showed at the beginning of my presentation. We want to make sure that that family needed to know that their group was an option, and you know, they were happy with having grandparents, grandmas do it, but then how down the road making sure that they knew that group is an option for him so that they could use that service when they were ready for it. So I think that there are some things that we try to eliminate if it's not required, but then also just making sure we still have a partnership with that family.
Thank you very much.
Does that help?
Very much so.
Okay, great, thank you.
I see in the chat box a question. Are you able to share the tools you use to create good matches for receivers and volunteers? So I think you all do a good job of matching. Do you use specific protocols? Is it sort of institutional knowledge, or do you kind of have a checklist, or how do you go about matching?
I can speak to ChildServe. We have an electronic, we use a spreadsheet for all of our opens lists, is what we call them. So if we enroll a new family or a family's in need of an additional caregiver, then we have a process where the supervisor will put some information on this shared spreadsheet, so that as we're hiring, we can be evaluating, okay, so we have this staff, they want to work these days, or they want to work with this age of child or this location in Central Iowa. And so we will compare that with our list, and you know, certainly when supervisors are hiring, they know their own caseloads, but they might not know the rest of the team. And so it's a way for us to be able to share that information and make sure we're putting staff with the best match. And some staff are comfortable with children with more complex needs, and some are not. So those are things that would be on that spreadsheet, you know, needs of staff, or maybe it's needs of staff who's able to drive the child, you know, some of those kinds of things, so that we can, it helps us make those matches.
Francine, do you have something to share on that? Sure. I was just wondering if Francine or Kelly had anything else to share on matching, tools for matching receivers and volunteers.
Yeah, this is Fran. Actually, if anybody's interested, I can share with you some of the documents that we use when we're doing our assessments, and that's what we use to do, you know, for each side, for the volunteer and for the family. We have a nice sheet that we use so that when we're having our weekly meetings and talking about them, we can remember, you know, what things are. So I'll share that with whoever's interested. Absolutely.
Wonderful. If you could send it to either
Fran, I remember, you know, back to the original interview, I'm so impressed by that matching process. And I don't think you, I think because I rushed you, you didn't have time to mention this, but you keep volunteers for a really long time.
Yeah.
You might want to say how that matching process helps volunteer happiness in their jobs and also retention.
Yeah, and I mean, I believe I think it's really a combination of all of the things that we kind of talked about, making sure that we really are looking for that, we're really spending time to try to make sure that that match is going to be right in the beginning, with respect to the volunteer's time, that if we know that Thursdays at 3 is the time that it's going to work for them, we're not going to try to match them with someone that only wants somebody on a Sunday and then wonder why it doesn't work. The more that we can, for every little like with for every point, we'll put the same amount of effort into that. If the person really doesn't want to be, say if it's a female and she just does not want to be with a male, then we're going to make sure that we remember that we have that written down. If it's someone who really loved the opera, and boy, we have someone who loves the opera as well, if we can make that work, we're going to talk to them and try to work that out. Oh, you think, but if they can only do it on a Tuesday at 3, is that okay, Mary? Well, let me think about it. We'll go back and forth. Sometimes it could take 10 phone calls back and forth before we really find the right thing. So it is a real, it's a labor of love for the staff person to do this. So that's why our staff people have to be it's just not for anybody to do, because it's not just rote. It's not just what's on a piece of paper. They really get to know the volunteer. They really get to know the person, so that when we're talking about, well, let's see, remember Mary Jones, and we'll actually talk about it out loud and make suggestions, so it's a kind of a team effort. And I think that's one of the things that makes them stay so long. But we have people who go through more than one receiver, because they pass away, or they go to a nursing home, or who knows what happens during life. And so they'll have to be rematched with somebody. And these volunteers who have been with us all this time, they've been through 5, 6. Our young Kenley has had 4 receivers, that little girl, 4 different people that she was connected with, that she brought joy to in the last chapter of their life, passed away. And she has learned such a lesson at, she's 12 years old. I mean, her and her mom do it together. So, and that it was the same thing with that. So I think that and the way we appreciate, we really show our appreciation. We really, they know that they're part of something bigger. And I think those are the things that make people want to volunteer. They're not getting paid. They're doing this because they want to, and it gives them this purpose. And I believe that seeing a family member relax and find joy, and that as a volunteer they're able to do something that their family member cannot do, is such a reward. That's what we get from them, and I've done it too. The reward is you just want to feel that again, to know that you did that for somebody. With all that's going on in the world, to be able to help somebody like that, that's part of it. So I think it's just a little bit of everything.
Thank you, Fran, so much for, thank you all for sharing this. Thank you for staying an extra 15 minutes. At Arch, we will work to gather any documents that we can share with the network, and we will post those on the same website where you will find the webinar recording. And we wish we could talk to you all day. I'm inspired and uplifted by all of your work, and so grateful for your work in putting together this presentation. And with that, we leave you.
And don't hesitate to contact us if you have questions about the application process. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.